Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. 2 o'clock here, Eastern time, but wherever you hail, all over the world. I'm so excited that you can be with us today for this conversation that I have been so excited about. We are here with 3 incredible people that I will introduce in just a second. So everyone who's joining us, thank you. I just wanted to kick off our time together with a few things. The first is a land recognition, which is something that I always do whenever I have conversations like this. And so today, I actually, so in the DC area where I live, where Food Recovery Network is headquartered, and actually where we used to be headquartered in College Park, Maryland, this whole area, the DC, Maryland, and Virginia area, or the DMV, is the land of the Piscataway. And I actually did a little bit of research in preparation for this conversation today, and I learned that actually the full name of the group, and they describe themselves as a band, a clan, or a nation, so they don't say tribe, is actually Piscataway Kanoi. And that is actually an English translation for what the clan actually calls themselves. And I will chat the name of the clan later, because I actually want to get in touch with them to ask them how to pronounce it. So I don't want to mispronounce this beautiful word that the band calls themselves. But it, as a people, they refer to themselves as Wiso. And that means the people, that's the translation. The name of the band is actually translated into the people who live on the long river with a bend in it. And we today refer to that river as the Potomac. Thank you so much for being such stewards. And that is a fight that continues today to reclaim their land and their sovereignty. But thank you for the ancestors and the current modern people for being wonderful stewards of the land that I now live on. Second, with Food Recovery Network, we believe that Black Lives Matter, and we stand with the people who are working tirelessly for equality for all of us. And we also stand with our Asian community. We have to stop Asian hate. And all of these things, until I no longer have to say it, until we don't have to write it out anymore, we know that we're being aspirational. And I know that we're all doing what we can every single day to ensure a peaceful, just, and equitable society for everyone. And here at Food Recovery Network, we also believe that food is a right. And that is part of what brings us to having this conversation today. So for all of you, my name is Regina Anderson. I'm the executive director, proudly of Food Recovery Network. I've been the ED for about 6 years this month. And I started these monthly conversations, and I'm calling them conversations because it's not a webinar, it's not a conference, conversations with a variety of amazing people, because I want to have connections around equity, around the work that we do with equity, around food as a right, and how we can all contribute to this conversation. And what I say, is widening our apertures. So we're going to hear from some incredible people today, and also in the many months to come, around how we can be better stewards, how we can learn from one another, and how we can start to see some of the structures that ensure people don't have food, that they don't have access to the resources that they need to live quality lives and to thrive. And when we all kind of get on the same page about that, when we all share tools and knowledge, that's when we really can begin to rebuild some of these structures, innovate existing structures, tear down some of the ones that aren't working for all of us. And we know that to be true. So today's conversation is about compassion and how to build a compassionate workplace. Now, these monthly conversations got started I think for a lot of people, the saturation point with the murder of Mr. George Floyd. Now, I've had several of these conversations before, so I won't always, go deep into, what that saturation point meant for a lot of people. I definitely invite you to listen to some of the previous conversations that we've had, be in touch with the folks on this particular conversation or other folks to continue to have those conversations. But for a lot of people, it felt like such a turning point. And for a lot of people, it felt like such a freezing point. And it's been really hard, that is to say the least. And these conversations that I'm hosting are around how can we build movement back into how we work together, how we see each other, how we show up for one another. So again, we can begin to rebuild, innovate the structures that are keeping us from living full, thriving lives. And so actually from the Piscataway Conoy, their Instagram profile, I saw that they posted this really awesome quote that I wanted to use to kick us off today. And they wrote, "Your relationships are activism. Building true relations is the only way to heal our hearts, to set us free from colonization, racism, and oppression." And I say, relationships are the things that help us thrive, to build that movement into our daily lives. So how to build a compassionate workplace means how can we show up for one another and get some of these really complex missions done in a way that keeps us all healthy and thriving together. And believe it or not, I think sometimes it's a little bit more difficult than we might think. And so I specifically asked everyone here to bring in their specific perspective into the conversation. And so just so everyone knows, with this format, what I want to do is I'm going to introduce our speakers one at a time as they speak. And so the first person that I'm going to introduce is Dominique McMillan. And I'll give a little bit of background on Dominique. And so after I introduce Dominique, whose pronouns are she, her, hers, will lead us into a conversation. And then from there, everyone else as part of this conversation will respond to what they're hearing. And I want to invite all of you who are also listening to please, chat in any questions that you might have. Feel free to raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question. We'll definitely have a Q&A at the end, but if you want to just, feel free to write your questions now. And if you want to, raise your hand when we have the Q&A, we'd love to literally have your voice as part of this conversation. And so I am going to now, as I said, introduce Dominique McMillan. Dominique is an amazing person. I've known Dominique for a couple of years now. Because going on 3, Dominique was actually a fellow here at Food Recovery Network. And Dominique was our first ever second-year fellow when we, extended the fellowship to 2 years. And I over the course of those 2 years, I've really seen Dominique grow and really lean into her particular leadership style. And it's just really amazing. So Dominique is a native of Connecticut. And so she was saying that although she was born and raised in New England, and me too, she has the hospitality and charm of a Southerner, which is really fun, a Southern belle. And she says, to be authentic in all spaces, Dominique utilizes the foundation of her faith to break barriers and foster communities working for the common good. She identifies herself as a freedom fighter of faith and currently resides in Maryland, so home of the Piscataway Conoy. And soon enough, will actually move to Tennessee and with her fiance, Kyle. And we can, Dominique can tell us more about that. But Dominique is going to talk with us a bit more about when we think about building, compassion into the work, into your workplace, what that looks like from Dominique's perspective. So Dominique, please.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Regina, for that introduction and having me here as a speaker today. I'm very excited because The foundations of compassion are an important aspect of being able to build community. And compassion, like history, is built when we look back and interpret the past, and in this case, our personal histories. I'm a historian who believes that we must understand our past to better map our future. So in the spirit of building, know that a workplace extends beyond our day jobs, but our relationships, whether they're familial, romantic, friendships, the communities we belong to, and any other place where people come together. Like Regina said, the walk toward compassion isn't always easy. And based upon my faith tradition, the human who believed in compassion was not well received by the governing powers that were in place. But if you don't know, I'm talking about my guy, Jesus, who outside all you've ever heard or had an opinion on, lived for real on this earth, Holy Bible aside. So being true to my words, I've come to learn and see that my life's journey has been a culmination of looking for, observing, and spreading compassion. I had to look for compassion at a young age. If you didn't know this, when I was a child, say around the year 2001, 2002, my mother came out to me as a lesbian. In today's world, folks probably won't bat an eye to that statement, but as a kid navigating relationships, I needed to find the kids and their parents who would be okay with the kid whose mom wasn't quote unquote normal. The search changed as I got older, and the societal norms, they've kind of shifted, but of course we still have more work to do to ensure the rights of our LGBTQ neighbors and friends. As I grew older, an adolescent / young adult, I began observing more acts of compassion that came my way. And an example that I've realized, and this is actually a more recent realization, and I've actually vocalized this to the person who had this impact, is my great friend and sister. Her name's Shekinah Starks, and she gave me some tough love after me being a negative Nelly. Like Regina said, I'm from the great state of Connecticut. I'll always say that, but in my journey, I did have to move from Connecticut to Massachusetts, to Springfield, Massachusetts to be exact. And my life did kind of feel a bit awful. I moved from Connecticut to Massachusetts. When I was in Connecticut, I was in a school systems that were rich with resources. I'm a band kid at heart. I've got a little tattoo on my finger that's of a clarinet because I played for so long. And I have another tattoo on my leg that says there's no let up in the setup, because I had a band director that was compassionate and invested in the students of Springfield. But I came from a place where I was learning how to play an instrument in the 3rd grade to a place where folks were learning how to play an instrument from 9th grade, even until maybe their last semester before graduating high school, which is a completely different experience than what I had. And I was very vocal about having a different experience than my peers. But she came along and had to let me know that my vocalization of the injustices I was seeing, because it's an urban school district compared to the former school district where predominantly white, if you will, they talk about schools and being funded by tax dollars, and you come from one place and you go to another, you get into a whole lot of why there are injustices in our public education system. But with that aside, the words I was expressing, they weren't out of compassion. They were not out of loving someone else and loving myself. And so she had to set me straight and be like, listen, understand you come from such and such, and there's this experience. You're now in a place where folks' parents may not be able to be as involved in their education. Students are working full time because they need to provide not only for themselves, but for others. And you going around spewing out all of this is not helpful to anyone here, but let me reel you in so that you can be a part of this community and be an advocate and also help make changes. And so in that, I definitely was involved in my student activities inside the community, outside the community, and left an impact. Moving forward, spreading compassion has required me to sit in the framework of loving my neighbor as I love myself. So now I work at and for organizations that are working toward that common good, that is promoting people to be themselves wholeheartedly. And within my organization, I try to step into those leadership positions where I can facilitate conversations that allow people to be who they are called to be, who they're called to be in action, how that manifests in their lives. And recently I've been doing a story of self-activity with the people around, asking those questions. Who am I? Who am I called to be? Who am I in action? And this really comes from my foundation at Barry University. As Regina said, I am rooted in a faith. It's a faith that I chose later on. Barry University is a Catholic university sponsored by the Adrian sisters out of Adrian, Michigan. They're a Dominican order. And I'll say I'm more of a Barry University Catholic than an everyday Catholic because I was baptized and confirmed at 21 years old. A lot of people who come from the faith have been part of the faith their entire lives. And the relationship looks different than learning from it outside. Also having an intellectual framework in a space where there are priests and theologians with PhDs, and it's not just the mystical you might have heard or assume when you hear someone might be Catholic or those perceptions, but that was the key tenet: love your neighbor as you love yourself. So it's very much rooted in the social justice and building community with the folks I wanted to work with to reach that common goal, because a lot of times we're just thrown together to do, but we don't take the time to learn about us as individuals to make that collective do, which one of our future speakers will be able to dive into a little bit later. But as I wrap up and reflect on who I am, who I'm called to be in this active compassion, I bring it back to how I started of, you have to look back and interpret the past to be able to move forward in the future of spreading compassion among the people you work with, the people you've built relationships with, the people you want to be able to make change with. And I think of our community at Food Recovery Network, where it's a bunch of students, and sometimes those faculty members, dining services, the people at the partner organizations coming together to create a system that can be sustained through the compassion toward the earth, compassion towards our hungry neighbors, and then the compassion toward having community. So with that, thank you, and I will turn it to Regina to moderate out questions.
Dominique, thank you so much. I really look forward to hearing what Matt and Corey, thought about, your words. But for me, one thing that you said, I mean, lots of things that you just said, I will continue to ruminate on. But it's really funny when we think about community, and sometimes in our workplace, it's just like you just all happen to be here together. And now you have to sort of figure it out from there. And we don't think about that often enough. It's almost like, well, why would we get along? But I really think those early foundations experiences that you talked about, I think so many of us can really lean into that when we find ourselves in places where we're not leading with our own compassion. But I invite, Matt, Corey, I don't, if either one of you would like to go first to just let us know what struck you from what Dominique was saying.
I'll jump in. And one of the things that stuck out, and there's so much going through my mind that I'm sure will bleed over into what I talk about in a second. But one of the things is just this importance of your own individual story and how that affects how you show up. I think that so often we think about people in this blanket kind of way. And what I don't think a lot of companies and organizations think about is just how important it is to make space for that individual. And the word that comes to mind for me is their belonging. That's something that popped into my mind as you were kind of wrapping up, Dominique. And so I guess this is why we're here. How could we create belonging for people? But it's really clear to me from what Dominique was saying that we need to acknowledge that each person has their own story and background, and that doesn't necessarily give it some kind of point value, but it is valuable inherently in knowing what that story is. So that was my big reflection there.
Dominique, I really wrote down one of the first things you said, which was talking about that you come at things from the lens of a historian, of understanding the past. And I love that in combination with considering compassion and learning compassion practices and applying it to everyday life, because I think it is this idea. If anyone hasn't watched Mad Men, I'm going to spoil maybe part of the first season for you. But this one moment sticks with me when one character feels like she's been persecuted by another who's her direct superior in the office. And then she has this moment where she realizes, oh, you're saying these things because you think you're helping me, because you think that's going to help me succeed at this job or socially or whatever the case may be. And it's this idea that still sticks with me to this day, that everything that everyone is doing makes sense within their own context. So that really stuck out to me. I love that thought. You have to understand the past to understand the present.
And Dominique, if you have, response to that, no pressure, but I definitely want to make sure that we are holding up to this concept of a conversation, but.
No, absolutely. I love Mad Men, and I believe you're talking about Miss Peggy Olson with, yes, absolutely. I think I have had to experience when I talk about studying history, either A, I've received, oh, I hate history, and they'll reference some sort of like teacher they had in middle school that made it an awful time, but there's so much value outside of the stereotypical, oh, I'm learning US history, European history, but people's histories, I guess that might be part anthropology, sociology, has an impact of like how they do show up. And when I do spend time with people, I'm not very much a fan of small talk. Like I will ask the questions that you shouldn't ask at the dinner table, but they're in a safe manner that allows for a healthy dialogue. I will say in my time at FRN, in the office, there was a lunch table. And I think around that lunch table sparked a lot of dialogue with the team about progressive taxing or what free food could look like in our system, or is there a food culture here? Really getting to what people think and how sometimes, even if we sit opposite on a spectrum of a sort, whether it's political, ideological, religious, etc., there are those where we intersect, I think, is where we can find that compassion window and make real progress. And a lot of times it can be uncomfortable. I think that's the part of the compassion walk that's important, is that uncomfortability of being authentic, asking people to be their authentic selves, and then realizing that in that you'll have to continue to have that grace and confidence of being who you are, being okay with who other people are, and being a teacher, a leader and a teacher that folks want to follow, who people want to follow and who people want to look up to. So it's a challenge, but I think the greatest part is like when you rise to the occasion, you can feel it in the communities you enter into.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I told you all we are just in for a treat. Thank you, Dominique, for that. Really amazing. And I'm going to transition to introduce our next speaker that you've heard from, Matt Scott. And I will say to everyone, who's listening, and for those of you in the future who will listen to this recording, that Dominique, Matt, and Corey are personal friends of mine. I have a deep history with each of them, but I consider each of them, a friend in my life. So I just wanted to say that. And Matt, I'm a huge fan. There's going to be a lot of expressing of gratitude and love, because it's just really incredible human beings, and Matt is just an awesome human. And we got a little taste of it here with Matt's reflection on what Dominique was saying. But when we think about storytelling, Matt for me is the first person I think of through his many projects. So Matt has an inclusive impact storytelling project called Let's Care, and he's interviewed over 100 change makers, and it's just an incredible platform. I've learned so much from the people that Matt has interviewed. It's really fun. And it is a really just an awesome platform. So please do check it out. We'll make sure that everyone has access to that. But so a little bit more about Matt. He is a social impact storyteller, and he does wonderfully at passing the mic to change makers who often go unheard. And my bestie from grad school, Dr. Bishop, that's what she calls the rise zone, passing the mic and just creating this groundswell or connectivity to other voices. So that's definitely what Matt does. He's also the lead storyteller at the world's leading climate solutions resource called Project Drawdown, another really fantastic organization. If you haven't heard of them, I definitely suggest learning more about Project Drawdown, and you'll be able to see Matt's work there. And so, I mean, Matt has just done so much in such a young, short amount of time on this earth. So Matt, thank you so much for your time today. And I really look forward to hearing your thoughts on when we think about building a compassionate workplace. So thanks, Matt, for being here.
Yeah, thank you, Regina, and thanks everyone for being here. And just to start out, it's funny because I had an idea of what I wanted to share, and then now, Dominique, you really sparked for me just this thinking even more about identity. So Regina, thank you for that introduction. And one thing that I like to talk about a lot is that in my work doing social impact storytelling, I focus so much on identity, and really to break that down, the things that make people who they are, because as your example pointed to, Dominique, that really impacts how we show up in the world and how we interact with the world, how we interact with one another. That also impacts what works for us and what doesn't work for us as humans. So I mentioned this word belonging a second ago in reflecting on Dominique's story. And I think a lot about belonging because one of the things that I've learned, and I really want to credit Brene Brown for this, because she has so many different great insights as a vulnerability and shame and belonging and compassion and empathy researcher. But one thing that she talks about is that, people need to feel like they fully show up to belong, or in other words, belonging is feeling like you could fully show up as yourself. And where that aligns with the workplace, or sometimes conflicts with the workplace, is that a lot of people don't necessarily have that space to show up and aren't given the opportunity to fully feel like they belong. To kind of think about where my journey as a storyteller started, and also about this topic of compassion and where it started with me, I actually go back to not the start of my storytelling work, but actually back to college, when I actually first really realized the power of questions to help us develop empathy, and then help us develop compassion and practice compassion toward one another. And for me, I think the place where that was sparked was actually in my work on campus, when I was part of Students Against Sexual Assault, which was a student advocacy organization, but also where I would work with survivors. And the thing that was so powerful for me to really learn and have that imprinted, that lesson imprinted on me, was that each and every person has their own way that they want to navigate, the negative experiences they have. And you could apply that to sexual assault on a campus, but more broadly, everyone's different. There's no one size fits all approach. And in doing that work on my campus at George Washington University, and in kind of getting comfortable in that work, especially as a man in that space, I had to realize that active listening was so critical, and that giving people the space to tell their own stories was so critical. And so now, thinking just more about this topic of compassion and where those two things meet, I almost feel like what that Students Against Sexual Assault experience, and what more of my experience is asking people what they care about, who they are, how they want to show up, how they want others to show up for them, has actually allowed me to, and maybe this term is thought by some to be a cliche, but I think it's really powerful. It's helped me realize the power of creating a safe space for people. And so that doesn't mean, in my mind, treating people with kid gloves in some way. That means helping people see that you're willing to listen to what their needs are, and cater to it. And another word I think of when I think of that's of safe space is just accessibility, because we're creating space for people to belong, coming back to that word. But, thinking about the power of questions and how I kind of continue to ensure that compassion is something that comes up in my life. I think that questions are so powerful in a workplace or otherwise, or in the work that I've done with Let's Care, interviewing people, because it really helps you understand people's value systems. It helps you understand their needs. It helps you understand what makes them tick. It also helps us value one another. And this is something I've seen so much, that people look at asking questions, people look at valuing each other as something exceptional, as opposed to being something that is something that each and every one of us can do every day. I don't want the fact that I ask people questions and want to know about their stories to be something that's special. I want it to be something that each and every one of us embrace. And so for me, I'm really thankful to keep perspective, and to maintain compassion by continuing to ask questions, continuing to connect with people. I do that through my work with Let's Care, where I interview people, and even have interviewed Regina very, very early on in the process, as one of the first 10 people probably in this well past 100 person journey. And for me, I think of interviewing and having conversations and asking questions as my own, what I've started to call my own system of listening. So what's my function, or what's my way of being sure that I am making space to hear what people need in order to access a space? What's my way of listening and making sure that I understand what values people have, what their history is? Back to something that Dominique said earlier, it's so important to understand the past in order to build the future. But in professional settings, oftentimes we show up and have transactional relationships that don't give us space to look at each other beyond our job titles. And so one thing I would encourage, especially as just a call to action to folks, is to think about what your own system of listening looks like. Do you have a system of listening? Do you have regular one-on-ones with people at work or otherwise, to learn about them, to talk about things that aren't work and your transactions? Maybe for you, it's not conversations and asking questions, even though that's my thing. For you, it might be, hosting dialogues like what Regina's doing here with the conversations. I think the key, though, when it comes to creating a system of listening for me, and how that feeds into compassion, is that it's about having some kind of way to regularly expand your perspective beyond what you already know. And the way that ties in with compassion is that it helps us do a gut check on how we're showing up for the communities we are. And like I was saying toward the beginning, it helps us create spaces of belonging so that people can show up and make the impacts that we want them to make, whether it's in a context like FRN, Let's Care, Project Drawdown, or any of the impactful work that we're doing. So again, think about what that system of listening might look like for you. And I will hand it back over to Regina for reactions and reflections.
Thank you so much. And my first feeling when I was listening to you talk, other than just being completely blown away, which happens all the time. I'm never going to normalize that. I'm never going to normalize that. It was this feeling of the space that you mentioned that people can incorporate into these transactions that we have, and that there's so much, even at a nonprofit, where we have missions that are around, teaching people how to read, or giving them the food that they deserve, or getting unsheltered people into the homes that they deserve. Even at, in the nonprofit space, which is where I've, had my whole career, sometimes the workplace can be quite transactional. And something that, you said about, providing that space, I think that, again, with this, trying to get people to be unstuck, and helping to give that movement, when you mentioned not treating people with kid gloves, and that everyone is different. I think what happens a lot of times is people just feel like, well, I don't have time for that. I don't have time for that. We have to do blah, 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 blah. And we get into the transactional. And I think what, you're proposing is that you can make that time, and it is a yes and with the things that you're trying to accomplish. And so, Matt, I just wondered, because a lot I feel like a lot of times people are like, with us, with at FRN in equity work, I say it is everything. It's not a separate thing that we then, all right, we'll put away the equity work, now let's do the rest of our work. When we have meetings with people, that space is already there for us to do our work, to get to know each other while we happen to do some transactional things. So that's what struck me, Matt. And I, after we hear from Dominique and Corey, and either one of you, please go first. We definitely want to hear your thoughts to that, Matt. But please also, when we turn the mic back over to you, Matt, please do let us know about your documentary. But Corey or Dominique, what were your thoughts?
I think that emphasis on the individual, taking the time to get to know the individual, is so important, because we, I think as a society, given all the pieces, we really try to treat everyone as like a one size fits all kind of approach. Yeah, one size fits all approach. And we can kind of see how it manifests in the backlash, in the way we interact with one another or have assumptions. I was quickly going to Google to figure out a definition of like where I can see the inaction of people wanting to get closer to understanding their neighbors. And first thing that came to mind was sloth. Just that, if you're familiar with any of the vices or the 7 deadly sins, or even just the animals themselves, the definition that I've managed to find is either a disinclination to action or spiritual apathy in inaction. So whether it's in a spiritual context or a secular context, people not taking the time to get to know one another is just that lack of compassion within us. And sometimes it starts when we don't take the time to want to know ourselves. I think I was talking about this earlier with Kyle. It really starts with the person in the mirror. And if we don't look at who we are, how we show up, and maybe even the ways that we show up in ugly ways, like we're not perfect, we're not meant to be perfect. And when we're okay with getting to that, okay, I have quote unquote toxic traits or what have you, and we work toward being better, we're able to want to take the time to get to know others. Because when you're like fine with yourself, you're like making steps higher on that like hierarchy of needs, where you're like, all right, I'm all right, let me make sure other people are all right. And when you get from there, the community is able to grow. So those are my kind of first thoughts.
Now, what I wrote down from one of the things you said is the idea of safe space facilitating accessibility to belonging, which I thought was really cool, because I've experienced, and I think a lot of people have too, where you're in a job somewhere at a company, and there's an in group and an out group, socially speaking, at the job, and I think that's rarely, I think, a good situation for the health of the company or its mission or anything like that. But I think the cool idea from this is when safe space is created from a absolutely honest space, there's the recognition that that divide exists, and that the one group that's the inside wants to bring the new employee or whoever it is into the fold, that wants to envelop everyone, so everyone's on the same page, for the benefit of all. I just really like that way of talking about accessibility to belonging.
Yeah, thank you. And it's so interesting because when I think more specifically about workplaces, I've also been really fortunate to definitely work in environments with varying degrees of giving people space to share their own story. And that's how I'll talk about it, because like, to give a very simple example, I worked in a company at one point for a while where the practice was, let's start our meetings with gratitudes, where people could say what they're grateful for, and not even like talk about what you're grateful for in the context of this team and our work, just to like pump someone else up. But it's more like, what are you grateful for in the world? Checking in is a thing that we do at Project Drawdown. So making sure to go around, just talk about who we are as humans. A lot of people don't have that in their companies and working structure. And it's like, okay, we're on the call. Are you on Zoom? Great. Are you on mute? Great. Let's dive in. Here's what I need you to do. Thanks. That's it. And maybe the thanks isn't even there, right? And so I think that, back to what you were starting off with, Regina, just the barriers to listening. I think that's a great question, because overall, if I had to generally say what the barrier to creating a system of listening and just to building listening into our day-to-day is value. Like, how much do we value people's perspectives, and how much do we see what someone says to us and what information they volunteer or what perspective they volunteer as valuable? And unfortunately, currently there's so much. We definitely live in a culture of busyness. So we have to kind of squeeze in the things that we feel like we have to squeeze in the things that we can. But unfortunately, what gets chopped is those conversations. And I think that the place where I hope that more roles can get to is seeing, okay, for fundraising, having conversations and getting to know people is valuable. For marketing, getting to have conversations is valuable for these reasons. For operations and a company culture, having conversations is valuable. And I really believe that conversations are valuable for all of it. And so I do think there's some work, which is deep work, to get people to value each other's perspectives, which we know is much easier said than done. Especially, you referenced George Floyd at the beginning, but so many people hadn't even thought about race. People, especially white people, hadn't thought about race in that way before, when I know as like a young Black man that I've thought about it every day of my life, right? And so how do we get people to value the experiences of others is kind of the big question. But I do think it comes down to priority and helping people prioritize that. And then the other piece, everything else that you all reflected on was interesting, but I do really think this focus on people's voices and stories as something that makes us stronger is really important. We know that diversity is a strength, that diverse organizations are more profitable, that they're like quote unquote smarter, and that they make better decisions and consider facts more closely. Well, we don't have that if we're not actually tapping into the voices. Like, diversity is having those voices in the room, but inclusion is actually integrating them and actually involving them in some kind of way. And I think that's what we need to do. It's a lot of work though. It's a lot easier said than done, but I think that's kind of where the conversation is important to get this work started. Regina?
Thank you. It's a lot of work. It really is. There's no way around it. It's a lot of work, and it's what we're here for. And I think that's part of the getting unstuck. Everyone just recognize it's work. It's not, and the thing about diverse groups is they move slower. They really do. But if you want to get that profitability, if you want to have those better decisions, if you want to have close, fact checking, if you want to have people disagree respectfully, like that's what it takes. And I think that desire, sometimes when we have that desire to like move things along, that's when we create that culture of, yep, okay, get along to get along, and we weaken weaken ourselves when we do that. But there is also that fear of, saying something wrong and insulting somebody, or, and that's what happens when we don't have those relationships, that when at FRN, another part of this work that we do is a term that I know Dominique is very familiar with, our well of reciprocity, and I write about that, and I talk about that a lot still to this day, where if we have a depth to our relationships, when I say something wrong to somebody, if they know who I am and I know who they are, I'll take a little bit of water out of that well, but it's still a full well. There's still enough lubrication to maintain a friendship, work-wise or outside of work. But when we don't know each other and we're, saying things inaccurately, if we're not part of, the community, then that's when things can really start to dry up and, breakdowns can happen. So there's so many different approaches to this, and I really appreciate, this idea of your system for listening and understanding your own system. I'm going to reflect on that. That is just so fascinating to me. And I know that if people have questions about what is a system for listening, that they get to know, Matt, and please, if you have a response to that.
No, I just reminded myself too. Yeah. And I think that like what a system of listening to me looks like is different from what it looks like for someone else. Like I'm someone who learns a lot through conversation and dialogue, but I think that's important. I don't think anything could really truly replace that because people's stories aren't captured otherwise. Yet I do think there's also room to learn and expand through like reading from people who have perspectives that aren't like you, or listening to podcasts from perspectives that aren't like you, and like writing and blogging about it. Again, hosting dialogues is so important. Again, finding whatever that mechanism for you to learn and to expand your view is important. But you mentioned, Regina, for me to mention the film 20s and Change San Francisco, which I just remembered. And so 20s and Change San Francisco is a film that I made, that I released a couple months ago, and have been like screening with different groups and having discussions with different groups. It was just recognized in the 2021 San Francisco Black Film Festival. And it is this journey where I, as part of Let's Care, just kind of went out to the Bay Area to have conversations with change makers and scheduled chats with 21 change makers over 6 days, all about identity and impact. And so what was really powerful there, and one reason I'd encourage people to check that out, which is at www.lets.care/film. Again, lets.care/film. It's a model for like what happens when someone feels comfortable having conversations. And a lot of people got really vulnerable and shared, again, ways that they want to be treated in this world, ways that they've been treated that haven't been great as it relates to identity, and ways that we can be better. And so that's the film 20s and Change. But again, I also think something that's so powerful for us to get better at all this compassion stuff, and at listening and at conversation, is just watching others model those conversations. So I even hope that this dialogue is a great place for us to model conversations about compassion and listening and all of these things up to anyone who's tuning in live or after the fact.
Awesome. And just so everyone listening in now and in the future, I'll link Matt's documentary, so everyone can have access to that. And so that everyone knows, we're gonna, a few days from now, we'll wrap up everything that we've heard today in a short blog post with the action items from everyone and their themed conversations, so that everyone has access to that with the link to the video. So we'll have all that memorialized. And so I now want to introduce my friend Corey Loftus, an incredible person. And Corey and I know each other from this really amazing organization, group of people, I don't know why I said organization, group of people that I first entered into this community when I first started at Food Recovery Network. And it's a group just like this. We have a variety of conversations on any number of topics. And it has really helped expand my viewpoints, my thinking, but it has also enriched my life so greatly. And just being part of communities where people are asking questions out of curiosity and showing care for one another, modeling that care, has really meant a lot to me. And so that's how I've met Corey. And so just a little bit more about Corey before I pass the mic over is, Corey says that he grew up in a blissful suburban utopia outside of Baltimore. And he had a life in the theater for a while, which I can't wait to hear more about that. And then in the world of yoga and fitness in New York City. And then that helped open up a pathway for him into entrepreneurship. So Corey co-founded and continues to run a group called HOME, H-O-M. And again, we'll send information about that. And it's a company devoted to creating opportunities for social collisions in commercial and residential buildings through life events and fitness classes. I love it so much. His wife, whom I've never met, but I sometimes hear in the background when Corey and I are on Zoom calls, his kids, his family, and his Pomeranian Lucy are all part of Corey's world in New York City. Also about Corey, he believes, working towards the Star Trek future that he believes is possible. So that's what Corey's working on. Hey, I'm in for that journey. So Corey, thank you so much for being part of this conversation today, and I turn the mic over to you.
Thanks, Regina. I'm really happy to be here. I'm honored. Actually, my company was recently acquired by Alfred, so I now work for Alfred, formerly known as Hello Alfred, which I'm very excited about. So I wanted to talk about an idea that I've been exploring for maybe a number of years now, which is rituals to create compassion. So I want to say I'm by no measure an expert on ritual. I know that there are, a number of doctors, like full-on university master's doctorate programs on rituals that humans and cultures have. But I can speak only from my personal experience. So I've worked for some companies that have done some cool things and helped to develop some from my own company. In my company, I really wanted to create some rituals that gave it this distinct feeling of openness and space and transparency. But more on those in a bit. So I wanted to first talk about the idea of rituals as being distinct from habits or standard operating procedure, where, and I'm thinking of speaking to my own connotations for the words. So it's maybe not the exact definition you would see in the dictionary, but I think about habits as being the mundane things you do day to day. It's like brushing your teeth, it's taking care of your body, what time you go to bed, you wake up, that, aren't necessarily ritual. They can become ritual if they, you bring them maybe up to the next level. There's a lot of conscious thought and meaning put into them. So I think about rituals as a doing that expresses shared beliefs or practice done for internal advancement or transformation. If you're just doing it solo, or maybe, wider if it's for a group of people. I think about it as enabling people to play around with different social structure. So maybe it's, the boss is doing something that someone that's entry level would be doing, and the entry level person is the boss for the day. Like that kind of stuff. And I also think about it as calling in imaginary constructs, like values or symbolism or ideas that create some kind of meaning to make these things more tangible, rather than just existing in this etheric imaginary realm. So when I started working on this project that then became my company with my two co-founders, we talked a bit about, and I thought a lot about what rituals we could do in our company to create those feelings, trust, openness, transparency, belonging, compassion. And I drew on my experience working for a few companies. In particular, I worked for Lululemon for quite some time, and they do a couple really cool things. A few of the rituals they have that I learned are at Lululemon, there's this culture of feedback where it's cool to give feedback on anything. And it's actually, I'd say it's expected to give feedback on anything or everything. And everyone's feedback is generally equally weighted, although I guess when it comes to like, designing the clothes, maybe the person that has the exact experience of designing and doing the construction and all that, obviously they're weighted a little bit higher than the other people, but it's expected that you continue to give feedback and speak up, which I think is amazing, because then when you go through that practice, not only is the individual getting used to giving feedback and taking time to consider what they're thinking, how to be able to articulate it, but then everyone else around them is getting practice listening and understanding, and maybe asking questions around where the feedback comes from, like that line of thinking, so they fully understand the context, so maybe they can understand how to package it better for the person that needs to hear it and keep moving the feedback forward. They also have a big culture of goal setting and sharing about goals, which I thought was really cool. When I worked there, it was like, it felt a little culty. Because it's like, I don't know, it's personal, like my goals and my dreams for my life. And then as I started doing it, I really got it. And then I knew I was in a cult. Because what it did was it made it acceptable to kind of invoke this human conversation with anyone else who worked for the company, and even people that didn't work for the company, just customers that came through the doors or just shopping, trying on new clothes, whatever it was, or wanted to learn about fitness classes in the area or something. You could start talking about goal setting, and it was okay to talk about your vision for the future, like what you wanted to do. It also made it acceptable to say, hey, I don't want to work for this company forever. I don't want to be an educator on the sales floor for the next 30, 40, 50 years of my life. And that was expected, that you would want to do different things, whether it was continue growing with the company or another company or whatever, start your own this and that. And it made it okay to talk about all those things. And that was really cool. And it also made it okay to hear about other people's hopes and dreams and be able to celebrate them when they had success, or, ask them about it, just really get to know each other and support people. So that was awesome. Really humanized people, I think. So at home, there were a couple things a couple rituals that I wanted to institute from the beginning. And some of these, they grew and evolved as more people came into the company and gave a lot of input and feedback. But the couple ones I wanted to share with y'all were before each meeting. And this was encouraged before every single meeting, whether it was, internally, it was a one-on-one with somebody, or it was a group meeting, or it was with an outside, client, potential client or investor or anything. We would do 3 7-second breaths. And this was done before all of our fitness classes too. That was one of the aspects of what the company did, and we still do now with Alfred, is it's very simple, where you just take a moment, exhale to get to empty, breathe in, count up to 7, breathe out from 7 all the way down to 1. Doing that 3 times, I believe, puts everybody in a much more receptive space. It creates a nice break from what has come before and what's about to come, so that you can focus, you can center, whatever word you want to use to describe it. So we did that and got a lot of positive feedback. For people that aren't used to that kind of thing, they get weirded out a little at the beginning, and then maybe after the first time they do it, the next meeting, they're like, hey, can we start with 3 7-second breaths? Okay, cool, thanks. I just want to make sure we're going to do that. All right. They really dug it. So we did that. We also did every week at an all hands team meeting, we did clearings and celebrations, which was a time for everyone to be able to bring up, which actually was something that came from Lululemon practice, where we would go around the circle and open up the space for any clearings, which would be anything holding someone back from being fully present in the space. And it could be personal. If you had a personal clearing, like I just missed the bus, or I don't know, something really crummy happened to my partner at work or something. If you want to share that, that's great. If not, no worries. If maybe it's a work thing, like, oh man, it's a real bummer. I had this miscommunication with somebody and this is what happened. But what's cool about it is it gave everyone a chance to, in theoretically a safe space, to be able to share their failures and have everyone support them. Not with, and there was intentionally not any space, or it was expected that you would not give solutions to clearings. It was just to offer it up into the sacrificial fire, if you will. And then we talked also about celebrations. So people could again celebrate personal wins or victories, and we could be with people for that or for work, which is really nice to get people practicing talking about each other, and that way you get to a view on what everyone is looking for and working against, I guess, or all that kind of stuff to understand what they're working with. So a couple personal rituals before I have one action step I want to ask to leave you guys with. So my personal rituals that I've developed from some meditation practices that I have learned are seeing the gold. That's what I call it. So this is when I see someone or experience someone that I have some kind of dissonance with. Maybe it's I see somebody on the street just as I'm driving past, and it's really clear they're having a hard time in any capacity that I might perceive. When I have a moment, maybe it's even in that moment, I imagine them in like full on like gold bling, like beautiful, immaculate clothing, like, just they're being their best self. And even just for a split second. And I believe that does something for them. I like to think that it helps me feel like I can do something for them, even though I'm just moving through and onto my next appointment or whatever the case may be. The next one is called a mini Tong Len practice, which is the exact opposite. It comes from a Tibetan practice where you feel others' pain and take it into yourself so you can move it back into the earth, which can then, absorb and transmute everything. But I do almost the same thing for when I hear someone feeling pain. Sometimes I'll think about just sitting with it and imagining what they're dealing with. Again, could just be for 5 seconds, and then just letting it go, just so maybe I can understand their perspective, their context a little bit better. So an action step, a thought I want to leave you with is to create a new ritual for yourself. It doesn't have to be for your company. Maybe start with one just for you. So a couple of thoughts around that are, first, to decide on what the ritual will do for you. Maybe it's to calm you down, to focus you, allow for a safe expression of feelings or emotions with, family, your roommate, a partner, a friend, where, they don't have to be any solutions. It's just expression. It's almost like the pressure valve releasing. And then to decide on what the ritual is, and then to start doing it. Those are my thoughts for rituals for compassion. There are so many around the world, and these are just a couple from my Rolodex.
Corey, thank you so much. What a wonderful way to flow through this conversation with some practical methods that people can start just today. And for me, what struck me among the many things, and I look forward to hearing from Dominique and Matt, is kind of what we were talking about before, is like this commodity of time, and how people think it is so precious that we move into the transactional. But you gave us so many ideas to think about around building in that space, where I was just so struck by the breath. And it doesn't take very long, all the positives that it does for people. And I think sometimes people get really like, that's for them, that's not for me. I'm here to do work. And those very people are the ones who probably are checking in to say, like, we're going to do the breath thing, right? Okay, just wanted to make sure. I remember so many years ago when it became more prevalent to, at conferences, we were sitting down all day, for everyone to come, sit up, stretch. And, there are the people in the back of the space just being like, I'm not doing this. And now, whenever, when traveling isn't quite the same this day, but when that was a thing, that moment in the conferences, the participation that just, over the years I've seen go up. And so that really struck me around the way we think we might not be that person. Or even if we hear the word ritual, we're like, that has nothing to do with my job. Why are we doing this? But that, in fact, we can be those kinds of people, and then how it does help us to, see others. And also this, I really can't emphasize enough the concept of sitting with other people's pain or their disappointment or their whatever it might be, even if it's just for a second. Human beings, we can handle a lot of things. We can be very successful in our jobs, and we can also, you know, have really difficult personal things happening, or vice versa. And we carry that all, you know, there's just so many different flows in any one person. And I think you really did such an amazing job of you know, showing that and painting that picture. But I wonder, Dominique and Matt, what are your thoughts?
I think something that is really sitting with me as I think the youngest professional on this call at the moment is how companies moving forward, especially as we've entered into a global pandemic. I have been working from home since March 2020 and will be continuing working from home till the end of the year. And just how the leaders of these organizations whose lives, much of their professional careers have been centered in the way things used to be. And then there's this rise of a new working generation whose life has kind of been centered around doing things from a safe space where rituals can happen and no one can make you feel weird about it, which is really cool. But then dealing with that pushback of people who, the powers that be, they're like, no, we don't like this, and wanting to have that, maybe that control over their team to maybe instill the rituals they have for us being in person. Just, I think, navigating what it means to move forward in this new world with a diverse, some of the most diverse generation and generations to come, kind of shifting what corporate culture looks like, what nonprofit culture looks like, or even just working culture overall, because there has been this growth in ignition of entrepreneurship that they talk about in the American spirit. I think it's always been there, but I think the youth are really looking at compassion and ritual building and that inner work, historical reflection, question, storytelling of how we can be the best versions of ourselves, and also include everyone, to not have that in group that we find in our cultures at work and in society.
Yeah, just to build on that, the thing I love, and I've been thankful to be in organizations that have had different rituals similar to what we were kind of talking through and what Corey talked through in the culture. And something that I think is really interesting is that I think it's so important, one, to build those in. Like, those are some of those systems where people could giving people a space to kind of share their perspectives. The other thing, though, that I think is really interesting is that I've definitely been in environments where where a ritual works for everyone really well, and where rituals don't work for everyone really well. And so I think it's like so powerful, number one, to build in those rituals, because they give us so much insight and they give us space just to be human at work, which again, a lot of people don't always have. We don't always have. But the other piece of it too is, like, why isn't this working for those people? That's always something that I'm like very interested in, because nothing specific comes to mind with this, because there have been so many, like, I've been working full-time professionally for like the last 8 years, and in 3 different organizations that have done 3 different things. And I think the key is like building in rituals to the point of what some of Corey talked through, that are really authentic. So give people space to show up as themselves, and also don't make people feel uncomfortable. Like, if someone, for instance, like walked around and said, or walked around, we're in like Zoom land now, so like looked around the Zoom and said, everyone, like, talk about what your favorite type of like pumpkin spice latte is. Like, I'm good. That's not for me. But I think that's kind of where inclusion also becomes important for rituals. Like, how do we make sure that people feel comfortable based on those rituals, as opposed to feeling like they're more, like, less part of the group and more marginalized from the group because of those rituals. And so, Corey, everything you said was so deep, but it's also, I think that's also like, gosh, what works for my company, what works for my context is so important there.
100%. All the things I spoke out for home that I developed work because our employees were yoga and wellness teachers. So it was spot on, because I had been living in that culture and teaching myself for quite some time. But exactly as you say, it definitely has to be the right rituals and the right feel for each company's culture, each group of people that's working there. And as Dominique was saying, I think there's a fascinating space when that occurs when there's a certain group of people that has been working for an organization for a while, and there's a newer group coming in, regardless of whatever their context is, whether it's different, coming from different age or different background or anything like that. That's a really cool space, and also a lot of the rituals that used to work with the previous employee set may no longer work. There's a point where it has to flip and new rituals need to be created. So there's even has to be a ritual to rewrite the rituals. But those are some lovely thoughts that and that's my key thought is, I guess, that rituals are incredibly useful for acknowledging each other's humanity in society and perhaps work.
I love it. Thank you, Corey. Thanks for that. And as we round out our conversation today, I am going to invite Dominique, Matt, and Corey to maybe restate your action for everyone listening in, and then also if you wanted to maybe just a quick takeaway from the conversation today, maybe just like a high level, what's on your mind. And so for everyone listening, you'll see that we didn't stop at the top of the hour. I want these conversations to be just that. And if we're all so time bound that we're just looking at when things are gonna finish up, we're not present. And so I always tell everyone with invited guests that we want to have that full conversation. And so for any of you who's like thinking like, oh, I try to let everyone know when you register and things like that to just give ourselves a little bit of time. And then for those of you who are listening in the present, hearing this message now, the thing is, you can play this for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, you can start in the middle, you can start towards the end. That's the beauty of how we can bring new perspective and new knowledge into our brains. And so, feel free to do that. And I invite you to do that. I do that all the time with podcasts, with books. It's just really helped me actually get more of that knowledge that I crave, because I don't feel so overwhelmed with, okay, well, this is going to take 75 minutes. Well, what if I just have 5 minutes? Cool, here we go. And so with that, I wonder if we can, in this order, Dominique, Matt, and Corey, again, restate your action for all of us to take, and then maybe your high-level takeaway.
Okay, so I definitely didn't follow the assignment in the beginning of sharing an action, but an action item that I want folks to sort of leave with. There are two. One that fits into my role at All in Campus Democracy Challenge is 3 to 1, check out your voter registration. I know we had an election in 2020, but there are elections happening in Virginia and New Jersey specifically in 2021. So if you're a student, a person who voted in the 2020 election, things may have changed. So check out your registration. You can do that at allintovote.org. It's a free tool to update your registration, learn about your polling location and who's on the ballot. And then outside of my role at All In, something that I definitely want the audience to leave with is the question, who are you and who are you called to be? Really spend time thinking about those two questions, as they can inform how you show up in the spaces that you do. And if you haven't thought about it, that's totally okay. It was kind of cultist, ritualistic experience I went through at my university that Corey kind of touched upon with cultures and organizations. So yes, think about who you are, who you're called to be, and as you reflect on those, see if you find any patterns. Listening to this conversation overall, I think high level, it's affirmed who I am, who I'm called to be, and also learning that like this journey is not linear by any means. It's very much a cyclical sort of act of taking in, reflecting, putting it to practice, revisiting, adding that bit of feedback, and then looking toward others to see if maybe not if it's okay, but there are always opportunities to learn and grow and use the tools that other people have in their toolbox to be who you're meant to be. So that's what I leave you all with. Thank you.
And I'll jump in with my action. So really in general, I'll mention just again, because Regina will probably tell me to mention it, 20s and Change San Francisco is available online. It's on YouTube, or you could reach out to me at hello@lets.care or community@lets.care over email if you want to organize a screening or talk or some kind of collaboration like that. But the actual action that I want to share, which actually fits really well with what Dominique was saying about really knowing who you are, is taking that time to figure out what your system of listening looks like. How are you getting those different inputs and really learning where people are coming from? And it actually just makes me think of something from the psychologist and author M. Scott Peck, who's written a number of books, including A Road Less Traveled, I think. And he talks about just this idea of updating your map. Like, how do you update the map for the world? Because the world is changing constantly. Like, I live in Washington, D.C., and if you were here 5 years ago, you might not recognize the street that you're on, for instance. So much literally is changing around us. So much has changed in our world from a year and a half ago to now, just to think about that. So how are you making space to really give people, give people the space to share their stories, share their perspectives, and to kind of inform, well, one, to be heard, but also to inform your perspective and view of the world. So definitely think about what that system of listening could look like. If it's in the form of conversations with people, I think that's phenomenal. But whatever you could do to enrich your view and widen it, I think it will be for the better. Corey?
My thought on having something doing after this is to create a new ritual for yourself. And I think about it as deciding on what the ritual will do for you. Then you'll have maybe some thoughts on to focus you on what the ritual itself might actually be, which could be something very simple, a visualization, or maybe, a physical doing. You touch something like, touching wood or knocking on wood. And then to start doing it and then refine, see if it works for you and does the thing that you wanted it to do.
Wow, Dominique, Matt, Corey, thank you so much for your time today. This was just, I knew it was going to be pretty amazing, and I feel that, I feel it. Thank you for all that you've contributed to this conversation, and for everyone listening in now and in the future. Please pass this on. Once we have the link, we really want the words of Dominique, Matt, and Corey to touch other people, because we are all engaged in really difficult stuff at our jobs, and compassion is a way for us to be able to do that in a way that makes us all thrive. Because there's a lot of hard things out there. At Food Recovery Network, we're trying to get every day the food that people deserve, and we have to have that compassion around us as we do our work. And so again, thank you all for joining in. I look forward to being in touch with everyone, and we'll see you at the next conversation. Thanks, everyone. Thank you.